Morami, Budri Nawunya. Hi, it's good to see you. Naya Gyari Sue. My name is Sue. I'm here at Brawongal looking over the Hawkesbury River. Can you see the river behind me? Now, I've got a question for you before we start. And that question is, do you think the Hawkesbury and the Nepean rivers are all one long river? If you could answer that on the poll, that would be fantastic. So, would you like to hear a little story about how the Hawkesbury got its name? It's a story that is, well, should I say, it uses poetic license, which means that it's not exactly the true truth, but it's very close to. So this is the story about how the Hawkesbury got its name. Now, Australia really only became known as Australia when the English started to call it that. And when they arrived here, they said, there's no Aboriginal people here, we can just use all this land and we can name it the names that we want to name it ourselves. So when they arrived here, they set up camp down near where the Opera House is today, and they made a fort because they knew that it was a place where Aboriginal people were and that they had to defend themselves from them. It's strange, isn't it? Even though they said they thought there was no Aboriginal people here. So they also had to explore to find where things were because they didn't know the land. The Aboriginal people knew the land. But what they did is they sent out one of their captains, a guy called Captain Tench, and he went with a few people and they looked at the land and they found land around Parramatta that they thought was pretty good for growing things. And then they went a bit further towards where we call Blacktown today. And then they went a bit further and they got to the bottom of the lower Blue Mountains around where we call Penrith today. And Captain Tench looked at the river and he went, I like that river. It's a mighty good river. I'm going to call that river the Nepean River, after some dude back in England. Anyway, meanwhile, back at the fort at Sydney, Captain Arthur Phillip, who was the governor and he was in charge, took a boat out and he went up the coast and he went along the coast and he went past a place that we call Manly today. And the reason why we call it Manly is because he saw two really buff looking Aboriginal men standing there. And that's the truth, that's not a made up one. He went past a place that we call DY, he went past the place that we call Palm Beach today, and he saw the entrance to a river. And he took his boat down the river and he went down it some way and he went, this is a mighty fine river. I'm going to call this river the Hawkesbury River, after some dude back in England. Do you know what? It took them 18 months, getting towards 2 years, to figure out they'd named the two ends of the same river. If they'd just asked the Gadigal people, if they'd just asked the Darug people, if they had just asked the Gundungurra people, if they'd just asked the Darawal people, then they would all have said that this river is all one river, mate. It's called Dyarubbin. And that's the name of this river. It's really true ancient name. It's only been called the Hawkesbury Nepean for less than 250 years. But for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, it's been called Dyarubbin. Now, how did all the Aboriginal people, the Darug people, get around on Dyarubbin? Well, they made canoes, and that's what we're going to learn about today. The canoes are called, in the Darug languages, nui, and nui are made from bark off the trees, particularly stringy bark trees. And what you need to do is you actually go to a tree, a really big tree, so one that's probably round like this, and you cut up a long rectangle piece up the bark and peel it off. Now that bark has to be treated. You have to take off all the outside rough bark and you have to let it steam on a fire, just the ends, so it makes it soft. Have you ever made things soft using steam? Sometimes you put a bit of plastic over hot water, you can see that it bends. So you squeeze it in on the ends, and Kate is going to show you how to do this later. So you squeeze it in on the ends and wrap it up with some string. Does anyone know what a mooting might be? Maybe you could answer this poll. Mooting sounds an interesting name, doesn't it? It's something to do with fishing and the way that the Dyarubbin people fished on the river, either from their canoes or from the water's edge. Hopefully you've been able to answer that question now. Well, a mooting is actually a fishing spear, and it's made from a grass tree, which makes it very light. And then the prongs are made from hardwood, which were hardened in a special process where you'd harden them over the fire. And then they were glued on to this stick using a special glue. And that glue also comes from the grass tree, and it's called yakka, and it makes it really hard. And sometimes you might hear people say hard yakka. It's hard work because this was hard. And to make it able to be used on these mootings really well, you actually had to mix it with kangaroo poo. So sometimes it's called kangaroo poo super glue. Now, mootings are not the only way for fishing. The other way for fishing was using a fishing line, and you would actually make your fishing line using string. And the women actually used fishing line more than anyone else. The women were the ones that went off in the boats with their fishing line and even cooked their fish inside the boat. So you get a piece of clay and mix it out into the edge of the boat and put a bit of fire on there so you could actually eat while you were out there. And the string is some string here. It's a very thin string, this piece, but you can make string thicker. This is made from stringy bark. And so when you make your string, you tie it round and round and round the edges of the canoe and push the edges up so that you can actually take the canoe out on the water and it stops the water getting in. Now, this string, as I said, is made from stringy bark. And I'm doing it a way the aunties taught me. So you roll away to the coast and back to the country. You roll away to the coast and back to the country. You roll away to the coast and back to the country. Roll away to the coast and back to the country. Roll away to the coast and back to the country. So that is one way that you can make string. There's other ways where you can rub your thigh with the string, and there are other ways where men particularly would put it in their mouth and twist it round to make some string. You can make string from a whole lot of different things. This one's made from stringy bark. This one that I've got a whole long piece is made from Gymea lily. There's other ones that you can use too, and those are mat rush, and you could use cabbage tree pulp. You could use a whole lot of other different things, but these are some of the strings that you can make. There's a poll going to come up now about string, so hopefully you'll be able to fill that one in. Right, now we've finished talking about the canoes and the river. We're going to watch a little video by our friend Jasmine Seymour about why the river is important for other things apart from canoeing and fishing.
Bujui na wunya kuma. Bujui mulano Dyarubbin. Naya bangu nawi Dyarubbin wa. Yanma wu marangwa. Yanma wu yarawa. Yanma wu Dyarubbin wa. Na wu nijiniku Dyarubbin. Naya Dyarubbin. Gentlemen, Mijini Guni Gama. Nawiwa. Dyarubbin. Yamawu Gunya. Dyarubbin. Mijini Durali, Mijini Guni Gama, Mijini Guni Gama, Mijini Guni Gama, Mijini Guni Gama.
Warami, my name's Kate. You might have seen me last week talking about bugs. Well, today we're going to be learning about canoes, and Sue's been talking to you about that already, on our beautiful, beautiful Dyarubbin, which is behind us. What a glorious day to be outside. And we're going to show you today how you can make your own canoe using things that you can find around the house. So this morning I went through my pantry and I found myself a cereal box that was empty. This cereal box is perfect because the cardboard's nice and thin, so I can bend it. And I found some wool, and I've cut myself 2 pieces of wool, about 30 centimetres long each. And you'll need some scissors. A stapler is helpful, but you don't need a stapler. And I've got a hole punch as well, and I'm going to show you why I've got a hole punch. You might be wondering why we need that. And I've got some little sticks. Now, if you don't have some little sticks to use, I just went out and found these on the ground at Barongal this morning. You can just use a pencil or a texter, just something that you might have around your home. You get your cereal box, you're going to cut it down one side and open up the bottom so it's all open, and fold it out so you can see that you've got your cereal box, and you're going to cut one panel from that cereal box. Okay, I did one earlier. And this panel is now our piece of bark. If you can imagine that this is a piece of bark, and I'm going to put the grey side out so it looks a little bit more like a piece of bark, and this was wrapped around a stringy bark tree, and the men would have gone out and asking permission from that tree to take that bark. They would have spent hours and hours and hours getting a blade in there, a little axe, and getting that off, and they would peel that off the tree. They'd then have a piece of bark that was ready to be made into a canoe. But they had to do lots and lots of work to it before that would be ready to go. They had to take off the outer bark, and that was used to make string, like Sue was showing you earlier. And then they would have to heat this bark over fire to make it so that we could bend it. Now luckily our cardboard bends a lot more easily than the stringy bark. So we're going to bend our cardboard over, and you'll see that these end bits kind of pinch together really nicely on the ends to make the ends of our canoe. You can see it's starting to look a bit like a boat already. Now I'm actually going to staple that first because it's going to make it a lot easier to put my string on. Now my string is like the string like Sue made out of the bark, but we're using wool instead today. So I'm going to staple that. If you don't have a stapler, it doesn't matter because you can actually just use the string. So straight away, starting to look like a boat. I wonder if it will float. I might try that later in my bath just to see. I'm then going to get my string, and I'm going to imagine that I've made this just like Sue did with the stringy bark. I'm actually going to tie that on one end just so it doesn't fall off, and then I'm going to wrap it around and around just like they would have when they were making a traditional canoe. And I'm just going to, you can either just fold it under or you can tie it in a little knot, and you might have to ask for some help with this bit if you're a little person. And then you've got your string on one end. We're then going to do the other end, okay? And we're going to actually put some bits of stick through here to hold our canoe in shape. With traditional canoes, if we didn't have those sticks in there, the canoes might collapse in and not hold their shape. So this is where we're going to use our hole punch. Now, again, if you're a little person, you might ask for some help with this. My hole punch goes in and I'm going to create 2 holes on both sides of my canoe. And I hope that I chose correctly today when I went looking for my sticks. I'm hoping that these will fit really nicely through my holes. So in it goes. Oh, that one's a bit fat. Let's try this one. Perfect. So in it goes, across, and I'm going to push it through. And there's my first stick. Oh, it's starting to come together now. I really like the look of this. And I'm going to choose another stick. Yep, in it goes. You might have to wiggle it, push it a little bit, and there we go. And a little bit later, I'll put my other string on the end there. I don't need to show you how to do that right now, okay? And then I've got my pieces of stick here that are holding my canoe in shape. And I'm going to test that, I think, a little bit later. But I want to show you another one another way of making this, and Sue's made one earlier today, and she's used this using paper bark. Isn't that beautiful? And she's actually used some string that she made out of stringy bark, and she can see she's got her sticks in here. So you might have a paper bark tree near you. Paper bark is beautiful and thin and soft. You might recognize this from a tree near your house. And this can be taken, but if you do take something from a tree, you have to ask permission. So you have to say to that tree, is it okay if I take a little bit of your bark to make a bark canoe? Always ask permission. It's very respectful, and it's what Aboriginal people have been doing for thousands of years. They wouldn't just take things, they would always ask. Again, pinch the ends together. You may not have rope, but you might have some stringy bark that you could make some rope with. Again, once you've pinched the ends together, you're going to tie it around and around, just like Sue has done on that side as well. And then you can pop your sticks in. One's coming off a little bit, and you've got your canoe. I think Sue's looks a little bit better than mine, but this is all I had around my house, and I think mine looks pretty cool. I'm going to try it out later. All right, well, I hope you have fun making your canoe at home, and this is something that perhaps if you learn it, maybe you could teach somebody else, or maybe you could tell the other kids in your class how to make a traditional canoe. Yanu!